Low carb environments present a form of mild or moderate stress to neurons, and that moderate stress is what causes the activation of that neurotrophin, okay? A low carb neurological environment is respective to a low glucose energetic environment. Glucose is the feed for neurons. Neurons feed off of glucose. That's how they get the energy that they need to transmit to one another, okay? So a low glucose environment is indicative of a low insulin environment. And when the body is lacking in glucose and insulin, it sends a signal to the liver to produce hydroxybutyrate in the form of ketones that are distributed across the body as a resolving substrate to replace the lack of glucose, right? It's just a form of carbohydrate to replace the lack of glucose. Now, that ketone does two things when it crosses the blood-brain barrier, right? It feeds the neurons. It gives the neuron the substrate it needs and nutrients to be able to perform its task. And it also sends a signal to the neurological environment of stress, of mild stress, of moderate stress. And that signal of moderate stress is what releases the BDNF, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Okay. Now, don't forget, this is only happening because you're not eating, because you're not taking up the appropriate nutrients that you need. Your body is releasing hydroxybutyrate in the form of ketones as a resolving substrate or the replacing of the nutrients that you need to feed these neurons. OK, but it's also sending a signal to produce these neurotrophins. OK, so these neurotrophins are enhancing neurogenesis, which is essentially creating strength in neuroplasticity, reforming your brain into a higher frequency of cognition. Now, the coherence of neurogenesis is expedited because there is no toxic neurological environment to interfere with the calibration of your mental acuity. Okay, what does that mean? Well, when there's excessive glucose, right? Because remember, you're in a fasting state. You're not contributing any of these toxins to the neurological environment. When there's excessive glucose, it creates oxidative stress. Oxidative stress are just hydrogen ions that get in the way of electric impulses. Electric impulses are just currencies, right, of electrons that flow between neurons. That's how neurons communicate. It's through electrical impulses. There's no oxidative stress. Okay, then there's no insulin. Insulin excessively, when it is excessive, it sends signal to the neurological environment of satiation, meaning fullness, when there's not really fullness, right? There's a need for energetic stimulation, but since you're in insulin resistance and there's an excessive amount of insulin, then you're sending the wrong signals to the neurological environment of your brain. And it causes it to recognize its parasympathetic behavior rather than its sympathetic behavior. So this parasympathetic behavior is more relative to being calm and being relaxed, you feel me, and being collected and being conservative more than it is to being alert.